Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. We have completed a section called Shaka Chandra Nyaya. Shaka means helpful. Chandra, moon, Nyaya, logic. So we have completed what's called helpful moon logic. What is this? We have not spoken anything about the moon. Well, it's a lovely analogy. You see, there was a time during the night when the clouds were cloudy. The sky was cloudy. And the student had a hard time looking at the moon. He couldn't find it. And so the guru said, you see, to find this moon, I have to help you out. I cannot just point straight to the moon because though you see some light behind the clouds, you cannot quite pinpoint where exactly is that moon. So he first pointed towards the obvious. There was a little bit of light to see, the big thick trunk. And so the student sees, yes, Guru, I see the big thick trunk. And then slowly, the Guru pointed him further and further towards particulars of the tree. And it got really detailed as the time went on. And the student felt like, my goodness, this feels like a 10-day course. And so the Guru said, absolutely. You see, you have to look at the small branches over there. Can you see that? I see that. Now move a little bit towards the left. You see that leaf, that yellow leaf almost falling down? I see that. So the Guru slowly led the student towards the most upper branch where there was a bird. And says, just above the bird, there is, see that light, that center of that light? I see now. And so the student was able to be guided bit by bit from something that had no real connection to the moon, and yet it was absolutely necessary to guide it to the moon. You say, what does the tree trunk or the leaves or the bird have to do with the moon? Absolutely nothing. But at the same time, absolutely everything. That was the means by which he arrived towards the unknown. So like this, you see, the Shastra has to lead us from what we are very familiar with, from our tree trunk called the body, which we all relate to, and it has to slowly, gently guide us to this invariable presence of consciousness. And like this, Shastra says, that's exactly where I want you to go, because I wanted you to go there from the beginning, but you couldn't get there, you see, because you were looking in the last section. You were looking at the higher teachings. This is what we all do. We go straight and open to the best chapter with the highest teachings, and we think we are so smart that we can figure it out. And yet 20, 30 years passes by due to the lack of Shaka Chandra Nyaya, which we have just performed. The student gets nowhere. Therefore, thank God there is no cheating. It really does require a proper patient amount of work, and not everyone has that. In fact, that's how all things are. You only get as good as you deserve. That's just a hard truth of life. So now, when it comes to these two realities, which is the body and the mind, we spoke of the gross body and the subtle body, and this existence, which is of the nature of awareness, which is of the nature of limitless, there's a small problem, and that is it creates two things. And we are still not out of duality like this. So this means if I leave you and say, the course is done, you have spoken about the koshas, we have spoken about this, who you are, and you're like, oh, this is wonderful. But the issue is you will still find yourself going, but then what's the connection between me and the world and me and everything else? And so this is an incomplete teaching so far, which is why we have to now collapse the very things that we negated. We have to collapse it back into existence awareness, because even your body and mind that you negated is but this one Brahman. Okay. So, verse 67b. Mrt karyam api etad api mrtaha na bhinaha kumbhaha asti sarvatra tu mrtva apahat na kumbharupam pratak asti kumbhat kutaha mrsha kalpita nama matraha. It says, a pot made of clay is nothing other than clay. And its true reality is always simply clay. The pot is no more than the shape of a pot and is just a superimposition based on a name. Suppose I show you this, what we call a teaching tool, and I ask you, what is this? Okay, you say it's a pot. Some people will say it's, a clay pot, or a pot is good enough. In real life, we just say this is a pot, because we assume automatically it must be, clay, because it looks like brownish. So you say it's a pot. Now, this object that we are holding has a certain reality about it. It has a shape to it. It has a function assigned to it. And it can hold water and be used. And we use certain names for this particular shape because it has a roundness to it. It therefore looks like what we call in English, a pot. Now, suppose we're having a little debate here, and I introduce the word, it's a clay pot, okay? And I say, well, suppose somebody says, this is a pot, okay? Fair. But I say, this is clay. Okay. So now the question is, who's right? Now the problem with saying both is, if both were right, if you were right and I was right, then I would go to the shop and I would say, give me clay, and they would offer me a pot. Or if I needed some clay to do some work at home, I would just go to the shop and I say, give me some pot, and they will give me a block of clay. So both right cannot be true because they are not pot and clay. They're not synonyms. They cannot be right. Suppose someone says they're both wrong. A pot is wrong and clay is wrong. That also cannot be right because I am holding a certain shape which we all deal with and call collectively a pot. So to say that both are wrong, that's contradicting what this is. This is a pot. So I can't say that both are wrong because this has a certain reality about it. It is a pot. You can't say that I'm not holding a pot, I'm holding a pot. You can't say that both are right because, again, if both were right, then they're not synonyms. So then what do we do about this? How do we come out of this debate?
One is more right than the other.
Then someone very clever says, very proudly, having heard it many times before, that one is more right than the other. And that solves the problem. But then, okay, so you want to be smart? Let's go even smarter now. Now, what does it mean to say one is more right than the other? What exactly do you mean in that statement? Why did you say that? What was going on in your thought process that looked at an object which we all collectively call a pot, and then a question I asked which is more right, and suddenly you understood something where you said one is more right than the other? What happened there?
Covers more of the reality.
Saying that sounds good.
It covers more of the reality.
Which one?
The one is right.
The one, oh, this is excellent. It covers more of reality, the one who's right. This is very good. Okay. What else comes up for you when I say one is more right than the other?
It's nearer to the source.
This is like 10 out of 10 now. Okay. Okay. It's nearer to the source. So now, which one is nearer to the source when we look at? Okay, so you say clay, but I'm very curious, why is clay nearer to the source? To the truth? To the actual essence of what this is. Why is it nearer?
What is made of the clay?
Yeah, because the pot here, which we all deal with and transactionally with, without the source, there's no pot, there's nothing to talk about. In fact, you cannot even imagine a pot, a clay pot without the clay. What is there to say? So now when you say which one is more right, so we have determined, you cannot say they both are right, because that's a contradiction. You cannot say both are wrong. You can only way to get out of it is you say one is more right than the other. Now the one who's more right is the one who says this is clay. But now that one who says that, are they in that moment excluding or denying the pot? No. So though their understanding, their cognitive ontological understanding of this, ontology means your cognitive understanding of what this is. Their cognitive ontological understanding of this object is they say it's clay, because clay is nearer to what this actually is. Otherwise, if I take out the clay, where's the pot? But if I destroy the pot, if I break the pot, the clay is still there. So what does this mean? Now, here's a little problem. Can you call this pot an illusion? No. Because see, the illusion, the word asat or tucham in Sanskrit, is, for example, I have sky flowers. Right? It's completely made up, or a square circle, or man's horns. Yeah, of course, you can imagine this, but this does not exist in the empirical reality. So in that sense, it's an illusion. So you cannot call this pot an illusion, but you also cannot call this pot absolutely real. You cannot call it asat, nor can you call it sat. Sat is that which is absolutely real. Why can't you call it absolutely real?
Because it depends on clay.
Yeah, because it depends on the clay. Because what's the definition of real? Good. It very simple definition if you want to pass. That which is real is true in the past, present, and future. So this means when this in time breaks, this pot in time breaks, the clay is still true. So this means that you cannot call it illusion, because illusion is something that is not there, or it's totally imagined. You cannot call it absolutely real, because it does have a certain dependence upon the clay. So absolutely real is out, illusion is out. So how do you, and what word do you use that this pot has? You cannot call the pot illusionary, nor can you call it absolutely real. Now philosophy doesn't have the right word for this. That's why you need Vedanta. And Vedanta calls this very in-between kind of existence. It's neither absolutely real, that which is true in the past, present, and future, nor is it an illusion. He calls it dependent. It's a dependent reality. So the pot is a dependent reality. Suppose we have a shirt and we are enjoying the shirt. It's a nice shirt. And we call the shirt right now, see, in the normal philosophy, we have two words. We have true and we have false. But in philosophy, we also have one more word, illusion, right? Illusion. We know this word too. It's just false. It's completely false. Now, suppose I say this shirt is true. This shirt is true because you see it. But then I start to take the strand out, the yarn, okay? And then the shirt, which I gave reality to, which I talked about, which I purchased, which I fought for, which I spent my whole life spending time talking about. And I pull the strands, and now this whole shirt is a ball of yarn in my hand. Now, from the standpoint of that yarn is now as true as the shirt was. Moment ago, the shirt was true, but now the yarn is also true. Now, from the standpoint of the yarn, when you no longer see the shirt here, what will I call the shirt? You can't call it real. Past life. You can't call it real because where's the shirt? You can't call the shirt an illusion because while the shirt lasted, it had a certain reality to it. So now, if we only have two words, true or false, I can't call the shirt absolutely false because it had an existence while it had an existence. So now again, to come out of that argument, you need one more word. What was the shirt while it appeared? What was this yarn while it appeared as a shirt? What was that yarn while it appeared as a shirt?
Underlying substance.
It was the underlying substance. However, you can even collapse the yarn to something smaller. So what is the yarn in reference while it was in the shirt? That yarn was this underlying substance, wasn't it? Then why didn't I call this yarn? Because it was yarn all along, wasn't it? Why do I go to the shopkeeper and I say I want to buy a shirt?
Because it is his underlying
Because
substance, but the
otherwise you
form
get a
is
cat.
important.
Yeah. Okay, suppose I go to the shop and I buy a shirt. What am I really buying?
Yarn in the form of a shirt.
I'm buying the yarn in the form of shirt. So then why didn't I mention the yarn? Why did I just say shirt? The reason is because for transactional reasons, you just have to say, I want a shirt. You don't have time to think, I want whatever it's made of. So now again, what was the shirt while it lasted? What was the shirt while I'm holding the yarn? The shirt, you cannot call an illusion, you cannot call absolutely real because the shirt is gone. The one word you use is mithya. While the shirt lasted, it was mithya. What does mithya mean? It's reality good, it's reality dependent. While existing, its reality was depending on something else for its existence. Without that something else, you could never say shirt. Without the clay, you can never say the pot. Without the clay, you can't have a functional working pot to be used and purchased and transacted with. Okay. Now, is there such thing as mithya? What do you understand when I say mithya? Is mithya like an object? What is mithya for you when I say dependent reality? An ontological order which is of dependent reality. That's mithya. Sorry? Excellent. So mithya is a relationship that it has to its substance. Clear? So mithya is that which is not an object. It is simply the substance obtaining as that object, which you then give a name to. So there's no thing called mithya. It is just a cognitive understanding between things. Cognitive understanding. That's what mithya means. So if I take the word mithya out, what have I taken out? I've taken out my cognitive ability to make sense of reality. If I take out dependent reality, mithya, from this, then how do you explain the relationship between this clay and pot? You can't. You now say, well, the pot is clay, clay is pot, both are true, neither are true. You get all mixed up. Now, when it comes to, in reference to the pot, what do we call the clay? We call that satyam. So I'll write this word. Satyam, you can call it the substance. Just have to remember, SS. And mithya is dependent. Dependent on the substance. In order to get to this, suppose this pot is alive. Okay. For the pot to get to its substance, does the pot have to destroy itself? Does it? Why not?
It's already clay, so it just needs to realize it's more.
Good. It doesn't need to destroy itself, because suppose the pot wants to destroy itself to get to the clay. You see, that doesn't make sense because it's already what it's looking for. Now, where can you find a place throughout this pot? Suppose you are like the pot, you're the pot. Can you find place anywhere throughout this pot where the clay is not? No. Is the clay below the pot, on the side of the pot, above the pot? Can you say that? I want to find the clay, says the pot. And I'm going to look deep inside me to find the clay. Is that going to work? I'm going to look somewhere in a particular place, like in my third eye, and I'm going to find the clay over there. Is that going to make sense? No. Will there ever be a time when this spot, even when it's ignorant of its nature, which is the clay, will there ever be a time when this spot is not the clay? Suppose this spot is going to a guru and says, I don't know who I am. I'm not this reality. I don't have existence awareness. I don't know what I am. I'm different. I am totally, this is not making sense. What does the guru say? The guru says, well, you see, you can only say that, you can only think that, you can only have those thoughts because they are pervaded by the very thing that you are looking for. Where you are putting your focus, my dear, is in the pot. So now if you look at your relationship, suppose between the ahamkara, your thoughts, and awareness, what is the relationship between your thoughts and awareness? It is like the relationship of the pot and clay. Wherever there is a pot, in this case a thought, where will you find the clay awareness? Where will you find it? In that very thought. And how do you find awareness in that very thought? Because that thought has no reality, has no existence without the clay. That thought could never take place, could never obtain as that unique shape as that unique, expanded I without the presence of the substance. So you see, every single thought that you have, big or small, what's inside every single thought? There's always existence and awareness, that which makes up your very thought. And here I am trying to entertain some magical thought, pump up some magical thought, and have the self be revealed in that one single thought. And yet, the self, the very substance that makes up every thought, is in the most mundane thoughts, in the most exciting thoughts, because it is the only reality that is. There's nothing other than that. If this pot, the irony is, farther it goes out to search for itself, the farther it gets away from itself, even though it is already the self. The self is here, the clay. So now this pot has to change its understanding. It has to say, look, no matter where I look, what part, body part, or thought, or emotion I look, that emotion, body part, or whatever it is, has no existence without me, the very clay. Would there ever be a time when the pot is not clay? Was there ever a time when the pot was not clay? Would there ever be a time in the future when the pot is not clay? Will the pot be more clay in the future than it is right now? Was the pot any less clay in the past when it didn't know its nature than today when it finally recognizes its nature? Is it any less? Now suppose that this pot always existed, and you were that pot, and you always came with a slightly different potness. Sometimes it always changed. Every life it changed, the pot. So since beginningless time you were this pot. But you changed a little bit as a pot. But since beginningless time, you were also the clay. So which one of those were you more since beginningless time? The clay. But did you know it? You didn't know it. Why? Because the pramana was not there. I didn't have the proper understanding of my nature. I was looking at myself, looking for myself somewhere far away, somewhere inside, somewhere at some location. And yet, throughout the entirety of my life, I looked at the world, I looked at myself, and I was only looking at the clay. The clay obtaining as different forms, which then I gave a name to. I called it a mountain made of clay. I called it I made of clay. I called it you made of clay. I called it Buddha made of clay. I called it that person, my parents, made of clay. And then I said, now I think I understand that trying to experience the clay doesn't make sense. I want to experience the clay. Does that mean you're not the clay right now? Look at that. I want to experience the clay as if I'm not that very thing right now. What you really said when you want to experience yourself as the clay, speaking as a pot, is you're saying, I want to just change into some bigger pot. That's what I'm interested in. I want to be a bigger pot. But whether you're the most biggest pot in the ginormous universe or the tiniest amoeba pot, is there any difference? No. The difference is only in the form, to which you then add a name to, but the substance was always the same. Not knowing this, what did I do? I went out and I tried to make myself bigger. Couldn't stand my smallness because my focus was on the potness. And so finally, when I come to the teaching, I see, Doesn't matter whether I am Ishvara or whether I am this being. Right now, my and Ishvara's nature is essentially one, without a second. And so, knowing now that this pot was more real, clay was more real than the pot, what does it do now? What happens now? So someone says, hey, pot, who's talking right now? Now that you're enlightened, who's talking? Who's moving? What does the pot answer?
Nothing.
It's nothing but the clay, the very you, also that makes you up, just obtaining in different forms, doing its own thing. But the whole thing has always been nothing but the clay. Whether you asked the question, whether you didn't ask the question, you were always just that all along. Until one day you finally ask the question, what is my substance? What am I made of? What is the universe made of? And then the teaching comes, and you realize there is no place in this clay universe that I can find which is not none other than clay. The planets, clay. Heaven is made of clay. Brahma Loka is made of clay. Earth is made of clay. Every single here person made of clay. The air I breathe is made of clay. The space that we move is made of clay. Death is nothing but clay. Birth is clay. Friends are clay. Family is clay. I have no family. I only have myself because there is only clay here. And so, now, you see, we cannot stop here because we're only speaking of a tool. We have to take this into real life. So now that we know the relationship between the pot and clay, which is, what's the relationship called? Satya Mithya. What is Mithya in one word? On Satyam. So this means it is a, now is Mithya different from Satyam? No. Is Satyam some kind of a different reality from Mithya? No. Where will I find Satyam in this Mithya? Everywhere. No matter where I look. In fact, I need not look because there's only one. So this means that wherever there is Mithya, that's where I will find Satyam. Doesn't matter where it is. Wherever there's Mithya, is there any distance between Mithya and Satyam? No. Now, if there's no distance, isn't it interesting how when my eye is only on Mithya, it's as though there is a distance. If the pot's eye is only on the pot, and it's looking for itself, this reality called clay, it's as if there is a distance, even though there is no distance. So what kind of a distance is it? It is notional. Due to ignorance, due to not knowing my true nature, the Satya-Mithya relationship, it creates a notional distance. And so what do I do as a Mithya object? What is a Mithya object, says the pot? What does it do? It tries to look for itself pure clay. Hey, never mind about Mithya. I want to escape this pot. And I want to experience purity. Purity. Is it pure now? What are you talking about, purity? There's only clay. It will only ever find itself. There is no pure, impure. Now, when I say the word impure, in reference to what is that word impure? Suppose impure just means like ugly. And suppose I make this like into the ugliest thing you've ever seen. Okay, you're like, yuck. Right? Disgusting. That's what it invokes. What are you being disgusted? What is your emotion of disgust in reference to? The shape or the substance? The shape, the form. So this means your disgust or your love, whatever it is, was invoked due to the ignorance of the clay. Due to the ignorance of the clay, my eye went onto the form, and then it attached the meaning, and it said yuck. And yet, that very yuck, that form, is the very same, made of the same substance that when I turn my head and I say, wow. Same thing. So all my responses are always in reference to ignorance of what is. When I recognize that whether I look at something that's yucky or beautiful, it is one without a second, what kind of a response do I have? Comes in, Krishna says, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. I have an equanimous mind. When I say an equanimous mind, does it mean I am denying the pot? No, I am still dealing with the pot as required. Now, the clay, having taken a certain form, which we then call a pot, will you have always the same attitude towards different forms? Will you have the same attitude? No, you can't. So it's unrealistic for the pot called a mother to expect a pot called president to be treated the same, even though they're made of the same clay. You cannot expect to be treated exactly the same as everyone else, even though it's only one substance without a second, because of the form and the status that we collective pots attach onto. We have a different attitude, a different relationship to that pot. But whether it is a presidential pot, a majestic pot, or just an ordinary pot, silent pot, it's the same substance. Therefore, you cannot expect, though it's all one, can you now expect to go and hug everyone, hug every single pot? Oh, we're all one, come here, let's love. This happens. Pots do this. Yeah. Smiley, this fake spiritual smile, like everything's okay. What? So, why would I carry that? If the pot has any sense, it will not put a spiritual smile because it's not required. It is still living amongst other pots as normal, though it knows its truth. It still deals with everyone the same as before. It still appreciates, look at this, when this pot called moksha has moksha, now recognizes its truth as the clay, is it now suddenly going to change its shape, change its mentality, change its, see different, something entirely different? Is it? How can it? How can it? Because it was looking at the reality all along. What's going to change? You see, some pots have this notion, once the knowledge takes place, I will be established somewhere else. And yet all along, even in the stage of not knowing, it was only ever witnessing itself, the one without a second. But lack of the knowledge caused it to attribute its own superimposition onto things, welcome snake, and it saw the rope as but a snake. And then it dealt with it accordingly. We do the same thing. I don't know the truth of this, of you as a Mr. Pot. I don't know your truth. What will I do? If you're fat, I'm going to then have a certain response to that. There's no other choice. It's not intentional. Because I don't have the right understanding, the mind stops at a certain level, and when it stops at the level of form, it has no choice but to argue, to compare, and then when a little pot sees a big pot, what happens? You don't feel good about yourself. You start to compare, get jealous. Because where's my eye? It's on this mithya. Now, we know that the pot resolves into the clay. Now, when I said resolves, am I being, this mystical, is any mystical language here? What does the word resolve mean? What's resolving it?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. And where's your knowledge? In the buddhi. So before the knowledge was in the buddhi, could you have resolved this? No. Even though I was looking at the truth, I couldn't resolve it. Okay. So now we take this clay. We need to break it down further. What is clay made of? Clay is made of whatever. You don't have to be a scientist now, okay? I mean, in Adi Shankara times, you just stopped at clay and you said, if the pot resolves into clay, then clay resolves into whatever the clay resolves into. This was their times. But let's be a little bit more scientific. The clay resolves into sand or minerals, okay? So now, if the pot was, if I don't have knowledge of the clay and I only have knowledge of the pot, what is pot for me? Satyam. It becomes an independent truth. Now, when it becomes an independent truth, how do you act towards it? You act as if it's the only thing that is. Now I get very attached because there's no other form like it. You see? That's where attachment starts. Of course there's no other form like it. There's infinite variety of forms. Due to not knowing its truth, I get attached to the form. And how long does a form last? It doesn't last very long. That's the nature of mithya. It's changing, perceived, and it's always dependent. So now, not knowing the nature of its truth as the clay, I look at it as satyam. But now we know. So now the pot becomes, in reference to the clay, the pot becomes mithya. Why? Because it depends on the clay, the satyam. But now, when you analyze further, how are you analyzing this? Cognitively. Just because I don't see what this clay resolves into, does this mean that I need to stop the inquiry? No. My eyes are not programmed to see deeper. Are your eyes programmed to see atoms here? No. So just because your eyes don't see atoms, does this mean now we stop the inquiry? No. So let's continue the cognitive inquiry. So now the pot is mithya, the clay is satyam, but now when you look at the clay, depending upon minerals, the minerals become mithya, the satyam, and the clay becomes mithya. So now where is then the pot? Where is the pot? Was the pot a pot, or was the pot the clay? Or was the pot minerals? Which one was it? What did I buy when I went to the shop? Do I go, hey, I want some minerals, or I want a pot, I want clay? Which one do I say? When you're buying a pot, what are you buying simultaneously? Clay and the minerals. What a good deal. So now the minerals are satyam and the clay is mithya. But then minerals, you cognitively analyze, same story. Minerals are just molecules, whatever you want to call them. So now the molecules become satyam and minerals become mithya. So now I'm also buying some molecules. On a little slip, you bought clay, you bought a pot, you bought minerals, and you bought some molecules. But then the molecules too resolve into something smaller, and you keep on going like this. And eventually, in modern science, they say that eventually, when you go so small, you go to the level of particles, like physical particles, like subatomic particles. The more you go deeper into the analysis, what happens? The more that tangibility collapses into just waves. They call it probabilities. So the more you go smaller, did you notice that the more same it becomes? Isn't that true? At a level of so many names and forms here, when you get to the level of a proton, it's just oneness. Oneness called proton oneness. But at a level of higher up, you see duality, you see forms. So while I see duality in forms, what is underneath there? There is just protons, or neutrons, or electrons, or quarks. And those quarks too, whatever they made of, bosons. So does this mean now that because I see duality, that it's like this, it's true? It doesn't mean it's true. Because due to the lack of my discernment, my viveka, I missed out the oneness that makes this up. That makes this up. Now, of course, you apply this to the world. You don't have to stop at the clay. Put this down. Let's take anything. Take a wall. Here's a wall. Reduces into the same protons and neutrons that this pot resolves into. Take the sun, made of same what helium and hydrogen. The same periodic table of elements, which is just atoms, that makes up your hand, that makes up a tree. So the smaller you go, the more oneness it becomes. The more you go up, the more differences, the more complexities you see. You see, when you combine those molecules, those atoms and molecules, and you just have, for example, a carbon atom. Great, a carbon atom, very simple. But then you attach, or suppose a hydrogen atom. But then you attach a hydrogen with not one oxygen, but two oxygen, and you have water. Now it's a little bit more complex. And then you combine water with a little bit of cells and some white blood cells, red blood cells. Now you have something more complex called blood. You see how we add names when you combine? You just keep on adding names. Now, having reduced this pot into the tiniest of the tiniest, what quantum physicists say is that you don't need Vedanta so far for this. They will say very simply, we can't find any tangible substance. It was all tangible while we were looking at it. But when you investigate to the smallest, the quantum just means small, to the smallest particle level, we don't know whether it's probability or whether it's a physical particle. So what does this mean? Everything you see in this world, including your thoughts, including your mind and body, for now just physical, it's just concepts. It becomes like pure mathematics. So at the level of the physical, it's all physical and tangible. At the level of the quantum, it is as conceptual as you can get. Now look at this. What's common? Okay. So pot is here. Pot exists. Pot is gone. But what is pot immediately? Not that the pot was there. What is pot actually? Clay. Clay exists. But is it really clay? No. So then why do you call it clay?
Transactional reasons.
Because it's got certain minerals, we call it those minerals. So I call it pot, but the pot exists. But it's not really a pot. Now I call it clay. The clay exists, but it's not really clay. I call it minerals. Minerals exist, but it's not really minerals. I call it molecules. Molecules exist, but it's not really molecules either, because molecules reduce, remember molecules are mithya, depending upon atoms. So atoms exist, but it's not really atoms, because atoms are mithya depending upon proton, neutron, electron. Proton, neutron, electron. Mithya, it's not really that because they depend on quarks. It's like this, smaller and smaller. So now where can you find, why are you calling this a pot if you can't really find a pot? I don't get it. Why do you call this clay if you can't find clay? What is the only principle that you can truly define this as? If I can't find a pot because it's really clay, I can't find a clay because it's really minerals, etc., then what is the only certainty that I can attribute to this?
Something exists underneath it.
Huh?
Something exists.
It exists. So what is it really? Is it really a pot? Is it clay? Is it minerals? Is it atoms? I can't say any of those. Because by the time I settle and I go, I have arrived to atoms, I'm now good. I sit down and I relax. The moment I look into it, even atoms, there's no such thing as atoms because it's just a name you attribute because of the proton, neutron, electron. So what am I looking at? What's the only certainty thus that I can say about this? It is. It is. It exists. So what's the true reality of this pot? Existence. Existence taking the form of atoms, of the form of molecules and minerals and clay and finally the pot. I can't really find what I'm looking for, but I can find one thing for sure. It exists. So there's one little issue now. Suppose that this object continues being mithya. Mithya, 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 depending upon, depending upon, depending upon, depending upon. Suppose there's an infinite amount of depending upon. Would you then have an object? Would I be holding an object then? Because it doesn't end. You need a substance for this, don't you? If it kept on being mithya upon, mithya upon, mithya upon, there's like, where's the final building block of this? In order for me to hold this, to talk about it, to see it, I have to be holding something. I have to be holding some kind of material. But I know I'm not holding the pot, nor the clay, nor the minerals, nor the atoms, nor the quarks. I know that. Science says it's just concepts. What does concepts mean? Concepts means very simple. For those atoms to come together, how do they know to come together as 1H and 2O? How do they know that? Does an atom have a little brain inside it? No. How does it know that? It can't be accidental. It has to have, because to put anything together, even at this mithya level that we see collectively, even for the potter to put this pot together, he has to have intelligence. Anything that has structure and assembly that is well put together implies intelligence, presence of intelligence. So now, what says to those atoms, which you can't really find, by the way, because they're nothing but proton, neutron, electron, but they exist, what lets those atoms combine in such a way that it's 2O and 1H? There has to be a presence of intelligence. Otherwise, it couldn't come together. Look at anything in this world. How are you going to put... Because you need structure, you need order for something to take place and have a functional value connected to something else. So you need a certain, that's what concept is, a concept, not just any concept, but a well thought out concept. So well thought out that by the time the very atoms that make up this wall, they come together and they produce a ruby rock. Those very same atoms come together to produce a cell, to produce liver, and then liver with the spleen, with the stomach, with the limbs, with the heart, with the brain, that too gets intelligently put together to form a functional body that can then inquire about its own truth. But wait, I thought there is no body. Is there a body? Because if I look inside the body, what is a body? It's just parts. Which, when you say body, what are you talking about? Arm, leg, heart, brain, what are you talking about? You put it all together and then you have body. Do you really have a body? Well, let's look at your finger. You take a finger, it's made of parts. This we know for sure. It's made of bone and skin and muscle fascia and proteins and cells and genes. And genes are nothing but molecules. Molecules are nothing but atoms. Once again, you reduce it to the same thing that this world is made of. Who puts this together? It can't be random.
Like if you ask science, they will say chemistry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't cover, like if you think, it doesn't cover the
It doesn't answer.
story.
Yeah.
It doesn't cover the whole story.
It doesn't cover the whole story. Yeah. Okay. So can't find if this were going back to the original thread, if this were going infinitely into mithya, and there is no satyam, a final building block, would I be holding a cup? No, because we just explained where's the pot, where's the clay, can't find it, where's the atom, can't find it. But the fact is, I see something, I experience something, so there must be some building block of concepts, of particles, of atoms, of molecules, of minerals, of clay, and finally of the pot. And what Vedanta says, now this is where science ends. Quantum physics ends here. They do not know. They're still looking for the final. Because if we didn't have Vedanta, which then says the final building block is existence and awareness, then you don't need Vedanta. If science said that, you don't need Vedanta. So why do you need Vedanta? To finally arrive to that final bridge, the final substance that makes up everything. Now, if it makes up everything, can you be different from it? No. It also makes you up. And that which makes you up is known to you directly right now as your self-evident awareness. It's amazing. The very awareness is the final building block of the universe. Because as we perform the inquiry, if we keep reducing smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, it goes more and more subtler. Have you noticed that? More and more subtler. Eventually into concepts. And eventually, as you know, things arise from space. Once upon a time, Big Bang. Space. Just space. And from space arose the first helium, the first hydrogen, and carbon, and so on. So everything keeps on reducing into subtler and subtler and subtler. You want to say?
Yeah, so Ishvara is sort of dreaming us, creating us.
This I will have to answer later because you're going into a topic that I haven't gone into. Maya and Ishvara will be another topic. For now, is Ishvara dreaming us? I would not speak like that, but it's an excellent metaphor. So when I do mention it, I'll cancel that out. Otherwise, you imagine there's some big being, and we're all being now dreamt. Yeah, okay. So, okay, but it's excellent for provisional teaching. So just like the subject-object, initially we start with the subject and object, you have to also get rid of that. Did you notice that? The whole self and the not self? So we first said, I alone am existence awareness. Everything else, we didn't even say mithya. We just called it not self. Now what are we saying? No. You cannot stop there. The whole subject-object thing. See, subject. When you say subject, you just mean self. And when you say object, you just mean not self. If you stop here, if without satya and mithya, you will not have resolution.
You will have duality.
You will have duality.
Real self and not real self.
Yeah. So, because this has to come somewhere, otherwise I wouldn't be holding a pot. Vedanta says the final building block is existence and awareness. So what I'm now holding is really just existence and awareness in the form of this pot. Of course, now you're going to say, how do you possibly create a world of variety from existence awareness, right? So we still haven't completed the equation. For now, we're just building up. Okay. Now, to give more definition to mithya, let's understand this relationship satya and mithya a little bit better. Okay? In the dream world, let's take your dream. You remember your dreams? Okay. It will be. It's okay, but you can still you get what a dream is. Yeah. See, in the dream, you, one being, who's resting in bed, you assume association. You take on association to a dream character. Like you, the waker, associate with one character in the dream. It's your own power. And the mountains and the trees, all of these things are from your own mind. So now the dream guru comes and says, you see, Mr. Dream character, this entire dream is your own creation. It comes out of you. Though you think this dream is real, there's something very amazing about your I am. This I am has the power to project all of this. It has its own power. Let's call it Prakriti. And this Prakriti creates this entire, we'll call it mind. There's a mind. And this mind generates this entire world of dream characters. Your own power takes you, the one being, one conscious being, takes you, as though it takes you. It doesn't actually take you. You're still safe in the bed. But as though it takes you and divides you into a million different forms. And it creates a subject-object duality. It creates a mountain and me, a conscious being, interacting with a mountain or a food. And now I, dream character, start to eat food. The whole thing, says the guru, the whole thing is a projection of your mind. And you say, how is this possible? He says, it's possible. This is how it is. You are completely free of this entire dream world that you're experiencing. But because your power is so strong, it creates, as though it takes you, and it creates you a one subject having connection to objects in this world. And then you fight, you argue, you marry other subjects, you consume other subjects. But the whole thing is just your power of the mind. It's like, wow, this is amazing. How does it do this? It does it. That's the beauty of it. It just does it. But remember this, you will never quite understand how it does it. Only one thing you need to understand. Nothing here is other than you. The whole thing, the mountain, the tree, you, the subject, the object, it's just one being obtaining as apparently two things. So think not that the mountain is different from you. Think not that the mountain is not self. Think not that your body is not self. Think not that your thoughts are not self. There's only you here, obtaining as different forms to which you then give names to. And in order for me, says the guru, to show you that there's only one being here, I have to pretend like you actually have a kosha. And so I say to you, oh, well, you have a body. And I talk to you like this because you've taken yourself as having a body since beginningless time in this dream. So I pretend, like I say, you have a body, let's work on your body. You say, fantastic, because that's your reality. And so I cancel that out. And I did that for all of those things that you took as yourself, when in fact you are the truth of everything. And I negated even the happiness which you were desperately looking for in every lifetime to make sense and meaning of life. Even that was nothing but you. The most mundane was you, and the most extraordinary was depending upon your mind. And your mind was depending upon your presence. Because there is no thought without awareness. There is no thought without existence. We already said existence and awareness are one and the same. There is no mind unless it exists. And say, wow, so you're saying that everything right now that's going on in this dream is all just me? Yes. So what do I do about this? Nothing. You just recognize your truth and understand that this dream body is just doing what it's always been doing, according to its personality, proclivities, inclinations. It cannot stop because your power is doing all of it. And you're making decisions, and your power is helping you, facilitating your journey. And so you say, wow, so this reality that makes all this up, including the guru that's telling me about it, is nothing but the very most evident I that was always there in every thought, in every experience, as my evident awareness. And then you wake up and you go, oh, what a dream. I'm so happy to be back here. But then the guru in this world says, what you just experienced was called pratibhasika mithya, a mithya generated by your own mind. Now you awoken from that mithya into what's called vyavaharika mithya. This mithya is generated by Ishvara, that we all collectively share. And now I'm going to get you out of this mithya, not that there is anywhere out to go, because wherever there is mithya, that's exactly where satyam is. You are not going anywhere, just changing your understanding of what is. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.